Thank you so much, and thank you for your interest in this arcane topic. I would like to talk to you about Wayang Kulit, which is the shadow puppetry tradition of Indonesia, and highlight some of the recent changes that have happened with the theater form in Java as well as in Bali. But before I go into the more modern type of performances that you can nowadays see in Indonesia, I just want to give a little bit of background because I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with the genres and how they have developed historically. Okay, so I would like to just kind of give you a quick summary of Wayang Kulit as it is performed in the Malay world. It's mainly the dominant theater genre on the island of Java as well as on the island of Bali, and you can also find it throughout Malaysia. And Wayang Kulit refers to shadow puppetry in general. However, there's a lot of other types that are considered wayang, which just means theater that took its inspiration from the shadow forms. So there is masked dance dramas, there is dance dramas with human forms, there's a narrative storytelling that kind of takes the epic story material and the character types that are basically coming out of the Wayang Kulit tradition and then develop them in different types of genres. So what I would like to focus on today is basically the iconography of some of the classic puppets from Java and from Bali, and look at their design process and some of the shared characteristics that these puppets have. I also want to just give you a brief history of some of the story material, the epics, the Ramayana, Mahabharata, that are the basis for these theater genres. And I would also like to talk about the cultural context, because they're quite different in Java and in Bali, obviously, because the religion's different and the history is different. And then lastly, I would like to talk a little bit about the new developments that are 20th century, 21st century, in some cases, new experimentations with these traditional forms. And that's a really quite an amazing process. Just in the last 25 years, there's been basically an explosion of new genres and new experimentations with traditional forms and mixing them with other genres, mixing them with Western film techniques, mixing them with other performance traditions from around the world. And so to me, as a performing artist, as a director, I really look at that process, and it really gives me great pleasure to see how those very, very hundreds, thousands of years old traditions are still vibrant and still there's innovation based on the tradition. And so that process I would like to share with you today. Also, I just want to quickly mention that Wayang Kulit was declared a masterpiece of intangible cultural heritage by UNESCO in 2008. And what they meant by that was basically an all-inclusive Wayang definition. So the Wayang declaration was not just Javanese Wayang Kulit, but it also included all other Wayang Kulit forms and even puppetry that is not necessarily shadow puppetry, such as the Wayang Golek or rod puppetry you'd find in West Java of the Sundanese people. So that declaration kind of maybe drew Wayang Kulit into or onto the global stage, and a lot more people are aware of it now, and there are efforts in touring those ensembles, more so than maybe you found prior to this declaration. So UNESCO kind of helped making it a little bit more well-known throughout the world. So let's start with Java for a little bit. I also brought a few puppets from our collection at the University of Hawaii. These puppets, I will let you all take a look a little bit later, are from the court of Yogyakarta, which were basically purchased for the University of Hawaii by one of our professors in the 60s. So these are one of the finest court-made collections of Wayang Kulit puppets from the Yogyakarta court in Java. And unfortunately, they don't get out of the box a lot to come play. So right now, they're quite happy, I think, to just have this lovely breeze and be out in the air and the sunlight. And I will talk a little bit about, first of all, these puppets are masterpieces of arts and crafts in and of themselves, even just a puppet itself before it even performs on a shadow screen. So these are actually plated with real gold leaf. These are incised in very, very detailed and intricate patterns. I'm just going to hold it up to the shadow screen so you can see the effect. So as I get a little further away, it gets a little bit bigger, but it also gets a little bit more blurry. So just to give you a chance to appreciate the intricacy of the carvings. Okay. And so a traditional wayang kulit set in the courts can have up to 500 puppets. Up to 500 puppets in a complete set. And what that means is, of course, anybody who performs with them, the shadow puppet master called the dalang, would have to know every single puppet and every single character. Right? And so to get a handle on who these characters are, they follow kind of what we call a scale of refinement. And they are categorized according to their level of alus, super refined, and kasar, which is coarse or unrefined. And so every single puppet in a set, it might be 500 puppets in a court set, it might be just 300 in a village set, would fall somewhere on the continuum from highly refined and humble all the way to the extreme end of kasar, which is typically the raksasa or ogres or demon type figures that would fall at the very rough end of the spectrum. Okay. I brought 3 of the Javanese puppets for you. And so I only brought ones that would actually fall in the refined category, because the more unrefined you get, the larger the puppets get. And by the time you get to the raksasa, they're about like twice, if not 3 times as big, and I just didn't have a big enough bag to bring them all. Okay, so I'm just giving you a sample of the refined puppets, and just by the head position, you can tell if a puppet is either luru, which is humble, or lanyap, which is mean proud. So the puppet on your very left, for example, is Arjuna from the Mahabharata, and his head is tilted all the way down, meaning he's very humble, has high self-esteem, but doesn't show it. So in their comportment within the courts, refinement is always associated with kind of respect and humbleness. Versus in my left hand, on your right side, I'm holding Krishna or Kresna. And he is a god. He has no reason to be humble in a way, right? So you can see his head is kind of tilted more straight out. So the chin is a little up. And so that's just one tiny element of how you can distinguish puppet characters in terms of their inner character. Puppets would also be distinguished according to just overall size, the thickness of their body, looking at the waist, the eye shape, the mouth shape, the nose shape, and overall type of elaborations in headdress and costume. So every single puppet is really a unique character. And not only that, some characters, for example, Arjuna, or let's take Rama from the Ramayana, they not only have one puppet, but they can have up to 20 different puppets, representing different emotional states, different ages, different circumstances. So what you sometimes find is in one play, you have 5 or 6 different so-called varna or moods of the same character appearing in different scenes, showing that that person or that character is in a different circumstance. So like actors on the stage, they can do a costume change, they can do a makeup change. A puppet cannot do that, right? So you have different types of puppets representing the different situations in which these characters will find themselves. And I've just put a few of those subcategories there for you. Some of them mainly refer to features, iconography of the actual heads, such as gusen means just gums are showing. So a character that has like gums and teeth showing is definitely less refined than one that has the mouth closed and like a really well-groomed mustache or something, right? And then kasar basically just means rough, and typically those characters have extremely bad taste in clothing. They have no understanding of proper language use in the court. Javanese language has 13 different levels of etiquette, politeness. So depending on what social rank a character has that speaks to another character, they have to know what language to use to show that they're properly educated about language use. Khazar characters will always get that wrong, and of course that's a great source of comedy in the plays, as you might imagine. So let's move on to the stories that are told in Javanese Wayang Kulit, and there's several different story cycles. I've given you just the three major ones. There's quite a few others, but the three ones that are listed are basically the animistic cycle, which refers to story material that supposedly predates the arrival of Hinduism. Yeah, so these stories are indigenous Javanese stories that are often used for exorcistic or blessing rituals and that tie into pre-Hindu gods and demon characters and story material. The next one, Rama cycle, of course, refers to stories based on the Indian epic the Ramayana. And then the Pandava cycle refers to the Mahabharata. So these two Indian epics are kind of the basic, strongest foundation of what's considered classical wayang in Java, as well as Bali. What you do not see on this list is all these kind of like additional minor cycles, such as that were invented during the struggle for independence, that became political modern tales that were then told through Wayang Kulit. What you also don't see here is things that, like the Christian minority in Java sometimes used Wayang Kulit with Christian characters from the Bible to convert people or tell the story. So Wayang Kulit has been used by many different groups and by many different religions and by many different social settings to tell different stories. But if you talk about the core classical Purva cycles, these are basically the Hindu epics, Ramayana, Mahabharata, and then some of the animistic tales thrown in as well. So how are these tales still relevant and how are they used within the cultural context? First of all, you have to remember this form is over 1,000 years old. So before we had any kind of public school system, Wayang Kulit was used as an educational tool to talk about history, etiquette, protocol, proper use of language, proper use of religion, etc. And so that was always kind of a reason of Wayang Kulit was important within society because it was an educational tool. It is also used in a ritual or religious context because Wayang Kulit performances can actually be done either protectively, preventively before something bad has happened as a blessing or a clearing of the village or cleaning of the air. And then also after something bad has happened, oftentimes people will feel they need a Wayang Kulit to kind of restore balance in their life, in their family, in the community, or sometimes in the universe, okay? And then in the old days, when the courts held absolute power in Java, the Wayang Kulit in the courts was also used to basically help with establishing legitimacy of the current ruler. So the Wayang Kulit puppets would tell the story of the court and would connect it to legendary rulers, and then through the convenient method of incarnation to the Hindu gods, thereby making it very clear that whoever's on the throne is there rightfully because they are directly descended from the gods. Okay, moving on to Bali. Okay, so Bali shares, of course, the Wayang Kulit tradition with Java, but it's completely its own thing now because in the 15th century, or early 16th century, at the end of the Majapahit Empire in Java, a lot of the puppetry and dance forms moved from the courts in Java to the courts in Bali, and then established basically two traditions. And with anything else that now develops for over 500-600 years in two different places, you will have completely distinct forms in the 21st century. So the Balinese puppets and the way it's performed share, of course, major characteristics with Java. You have one single dalang or puppeteer, you have a screen that's roughly the same size, you have the story material and the type of puppets following similar classifications, but if you look at the actual iconography, and I'm going to show you that, it's quite different. So we have Krishna from Java and Krishna from Bali. So exact same character, yeah. Similar crown designs, similar ornamentation and body shape, but big difference is, of course, the elongation of the limbs and the neck in the Javanese puppet. It's a lot less realistic in its proportions of a human body than you would find in the Balinese set. Yeah. And so these are kind of the most obvious differences in terms of the design of the puppet. But also if you look at what holds up the puppet, the Javanese ones are actually using a water buffalo horn center rod that is shaped almost like several double S curves. And so it follows the contour of the puppet, and when you press it against the screen, it reacts slightly more fluidly than if you have a wooden or bamboo straight rod like you have on the Balinese ones. So that by itself already creates a different way of how these can be performed on a screen. And so that's a major difference for people who actually perform with these puppets. Okay, I brought a whole cast of characters of the Balinese ones. These are all smaller and fit in the bag. So what we have is the largest one in a Balinese set is still not that much bigger than the refined puppet. So this is actually a Raksasa or ogre puppet in the Balinese set. Yeah, so similar things apply here. You do have gums showing, teeth showing, you have big bulging eyes, you have an overall thicker body, kind of similar than you would see in the Kasa or rough puppet in Java. So those are similar traits. Yeah, but overall, the Javanese version of this Raksasa would be literally twice the size, and obviously also a little bit harder to manipulate and heavier to hold up and heavier to play with. They also share the fact that the bigger the puppet gets and the thicker the body gets, at some point there's only one hand left that's actually movable, articulate. Okay. Historically, it is said that most early, like before the 15th century, most puppets were non-articulate. They did not have arms that move. Yeah. That's invention from the late Majapahit, so early 16th century. Here is a lovely lady. There's not that many female characters, since the Ramayana and the Mahabharata both are basically about lots of battles between guys. There's not that many female characters that play major roles, which is kind of general across the world, right, in terms of stereotypical narratives. So anyway, here's one of the Bidadari, or heavenly angel characters. Much smaller than the Raksasa, right? Also much more refined, and teeth are showing a little bit, and eyes have the beautiful, perfect shape of an almond. Also, we have quite a few creatures. So I just brought one sample, which is a monkey puppet. Maybe in shadow that looks really cute. I already showed you the highly refined puppet. Here, this is actually Rama. Sometimes if a set does not have every single character from both the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, sometimes a dalang or puppeteer will kind of have replaceable puppets because the iconography is similar. So you could have, if you only have a Mahabharata set and you're asked to do a story from the Ramayana, you're probably going to convert Arjuna to Rama and vice versa. And it would work because the iconography is similar. So those things are commonly done, especially in village sets, if they don't have 500 puppets in a set. If they only have certain major ones, and then a lot of the minor characters, like another sage or another priest or another Raksasa, they become kind of interchangeable, and you can kind of mix and match. And then as you tell the story, it's quite clear of what these characters are and how they relate. And then one of the specific things that we only find in Bali, is puppets now also have movable mouths. And so that is also a later invention, and is only found in clown characters. Yeah. And for those of you who might be familiar with the Indian version of the Mahabharata and Ramayana, you probably know, like, wait a minute, there's no clowns in those epics. There aren't. However, by the time those epics got adapted and changed and augmented and refined in Java as well as in Bali, clowns were added. So Java has puppet clown figures. They do not have movable mouths, however. And in Bali, now these are like the spokespeople of the common man. And they will not only translate. I don't know what's going on, son. What did they just say? They all speak Kawi. Okay? So what happens is that a lot of the characters talk in a language, Kawi, old Javanese court language that most people don't understand. So what the clowns are for in Java, as well as in Bali, is to kind of explain what's been going on, to talk about the backstory that might have happened before people came to the performance that night, or also just in the larger context, the backstory of the Ramayana or the Mahabharata. And so the clowns typically come in groups. So in Javanese, you would have Samar, the old father clown, who actually supposedly, historically, is a pre-Hindu character from the Javanese mythology itself, and kind of came back into the story and is now the advisor typically to the good side in a play. And he has 3 sons that are endlessly entertaining because of all their shortcomings and all their problems with each other and society, and constantly, you know, they have modern day problems. They always run out of money. They're always hungry. They always have trouble with their girlfriend. So they have kind of common man, common woman problems, and that is kind of woven into the actual story. However, they also function as the advisors to the good side, and oftentimes they are instrumental in actually bringing a happy end about by reminding people of, you know, a curse, or reminding people of which sage they have to go to find advice to then have the story turn into positive ending for the good side. In Bali, you have kind of 2 sets of clown characters. You have Tualan here and Merda, his young son. And they are kind of the advisors to the good side, and they always get caught in situations where they rather not be. They're always like on the edge of a battlefield, or they're always in trouble, and they're always trying to help, but of course, you know, they're old, or too old, or too young, and they're certainly not trained as warriors, so there's not much they can do in terms of just helping. So how they're trying to help is lead people to where they can find advice, or where they can find you know, the right weapon, or where they can hide, or whatever. So they're kind of like, sometimes they function as spies, and will sneak into the enemy court and find out vital information that they can pass on. So these are the clowns on the good side. But then we also have a clown pair on the bad side, and those are Delem and Shangri. And those 2 guys are basically thugs of some sort. They are happy when the negative side is getting ready for battle. They enjoy any trouble they can make, and they certainly revel in any kind of major chaos that the universe undergoes because of somebody made a mistake, or there's some kind of other historical moment that everybody's destined to have to live through, and they just really enjoy that. And so in a way, sometimes it takes the edge off scary situations. It takes, it takes the edge off things we don't know the history about. And so again, even in their kind of thuggish self, they speak for the common man and help kind of bridge the mythological world of the epics with the everyday life. So in Bali, I want to talk a little bit about the religious context and what you have. Some of you might be familiar with this. Of course, Bali is mainly Hindu, and so the name of the religion of Hindu, Balinese religion, is often translated as a religion of holy water, Agama Tirtha. And that is basically based on the fact that a lot of ceremonies, almost every single religious ceremony will involve the creation of holy water by a priest, which is then sprinkled on the congregation, on a place, on the stage, on the puppets themselves, to bless them, to protect them, to purify them. So Agama Tirtha is kind of really an important aspect of Balinese life and culture. So even if a performance is in a secular context, you will still have a blessing by a priest done before and after the show to kind of frame it, to purify the space and ensure that the performance goes well. So there's always a religious aspect in all performances. Some performances themselves are a religious act or a ritual. Okay. And a lot of them happen during what's called the Odalan or temple festival. Okay. And temple festivals, I mean, anybody been to Bali? Yeah, so there's a lot of temples in Bali, I think 20,000 major ones, and each household has their own family shrine, and each village has their own 3 smaller temples for different circumstances and different celebrations. So there's always some temple anniversary going on. Plus the Balinese year only has 210 days, so it comes around even quicker. Yeah, so there's always an anniversary happening, always a temple festival, for which you need performing arts. And performing arts during a temple festival are kind of categorized into those that are mandated and are part of the actual ritual, and then there's supplemental performances that are kind of optional, and they're oftentimes done near the temple or outside of the temple. So if we look at the context of some of those performances, they are subdivided into nighttime performances and daytime performances. Okay? The nighttime performances you will find for general celebrations. They're oftentimes those like optional additional performances, and typically will mark family celebrations, Odalan anniversaries. And oftentimes you have more than one, actually most of the time you have more than one thing going on. So you could very likely have a nighttime performance outside the temple, and then at the same temple later on the next day, several daytime performances inside the temple. Some of the nighttime performances are also used for exorcistic rituals, and oftentimes these are done after the fact, after like unexplained misfortune has befallen a village or a family or a compound, and then the family will invite a dalang to perform a calon arang play, which is a kind of exorcistic ritual play to reestablish harmony in that family or in the community. Sometimes you do that in advance, so you don't need a exorcistic ritual later. Sometimes you will commission a performance in advance to protect your family or your community. And so these plays are typically done also on a regular basis, and certain dalang, of course, are famed for their power, their spiritual powers, for their purity, and they would be the ones you would want to invite to hold such a play, oftentimes called Sudamala play, for the protection of your family. The interesting thing about those last 2 categories is a lot of those performances have built into the performance itself like a play within a play, which explains why these rituals work. Okay? So they will have, as part of the performance, at some point, we will retell the story of how it came to be that this person or this dalang or this puppet or this type of performance has the spiritual power to clean, to purify, and to protect. And so it's kind of a self-affirming ritual to tell people why it works, and now we're making it happen, so it must have worked. Yeah, so it kind of reinforces the belief that these things are indeed vital for keeping the balance in the community. Now, there's an entire different type of performance tradition that also ties directly to ritual and religious practices in Bali. And so these are called Wayang Lemah, or daytime performances, and they have a quite different setting. First of all, daytime performance, shadow puppetry doesn't work, right? So you don't actually have a screen. So what they have is this little string stretched across that symbolizes, just like the screen, the place between the worlds. So the transitional, liminal space between the world of the humans and the world of the spirits, the past and the present. Okay, what can be seen and what cannot be seen. So the screen has that function at nighttime performances, and during the daytime performances, the string kind of takes that place. And you would also have, typically for nighttime performance, you have a lot bigger audiences. You have a larger musical ensemble accompanying this, and the daytime performances are really typically intended for the spiritual audience. Okay, so they're subdivided into those 5 cycles I listed here for you. And so rites of passage within a human life, there's certain times when humans are believed to transition into a new stage. So 105 days is one. So that's kind of half a year in a Balinese year of 210. Then, of course, the first year anniversary of a child. Then, when you reach adolescence, when you get married, when you get your teeth filed, and then, of course, at the end of the cycle, also when people pass away. So at every step in the human life cycle, there are certain types of Wayang performances that are mandated to make sure the person is protected. Then after people pass away, of course, people believe in reincarnation and life after death. So you sometimes need to do a performance for those people who have passed on. Especially if somebody has passed on, like in a violent circumstance, an accident or bad illness, people feel very strongly that they need to have a performance to basically heal the spirit and have that spirit pass on peacefully into the next world or next step. And so that is actually something, again, that you also find in Java as well as in Bali. Then, of course, we can't have Odalan temple festivals celebrating the gods without actually giving them performances directly for their own entertainment. So a lot of the rituals that are done for gods in the temple, sometimes there's no audience whatsoever, except for maybe small children who always run around and get close to the dalang as close as they can. But no adult audience often attends those performances because everybody understands these are done for the gods by the dalang, and as long as he does his performance, nobody needs to stick around and check. And some of those stories are, they don't have clowns, because the clowns are basically for the human audience. They are much shorter, they're a lot more solemn in a way, and they're not nearly as entertaining as a nighttime performance that you're going to do in your family compound. So within the range of Wayang performances in Bali, there's quite a difference between these temple performances and then nighttime performances. And we don't just have humans and gods, but we also have the world of the demons. Okay? And in Bali, the demons are believed to actually live in the ocean. And so once a year, there's a big performance for all the demons in the ocean to appease them as well and give them a performance. So a lot of the village troops will actually go congregate to their part of the shoreline, which is kind of subdivided into village districts, and will perform Wayang during the daytime, oftentimes with trance involved, for the demons to give them their share of performances and offerings, etc., to just make sure they stay where they are and not come out and disturb the human realm. And then within the priest classes, there's also, of course, different initiation rites when they reach a new rank and when they advance through their training. Then there's sometimes Wayang performances for that to mark the transition into a new stage of the priesthood. Most of the stories, believe it or not, there's no scripts. Okay, there's no written dialogue where it says, okay, Tualan says this line, and then his son Merda says the other line. there's no written script of actually dialogue or puppet moves. What there are is called lontar, or palm leaf manuscripts, and they kind of have story synopses, oftentimes either written or sometimes painted like a storyboard. And so the dalang or puppeteers will study these palm leaf manuscripts, and these are the ones that are passed on to the next generation. But basically, for example, in Java, a dalang will not necessarily consult a palm leaf manuscript once he's in the stage of being a professional performer. He will do a 9-hour show, basically improvised, having memorized and having basically studied all the epics, all the different characters, all the different types of branch stories, as they're called. And then, depending on what the performance occasion is and what the host's request was, and maybe also the mood of the audience, that performer will then improvise within a set structure that also is based a lot on the musical structure that goes along with it, like a 3-part series, and improvise the whole thing. So you need to be a master performer to kind of be able to do this. Yeah. I've been in Java when dalang was invited to a house of a friend, and sometimes, of course, they also do not bring their own musical ensemble. The gamelan weighs like a ton, right? So you don't travel with your own ensemble. You come to a new village, you sit down with the host, you definitely meet with the drummer, which is the conductor of the gamelan orchestra, and you sit down together over tea, and then the dalang will basically say, oh, well, this is a wedding, so let's find an appropriate story. We'll do this episode from the Mahabharata, and we'll feature these characters, and he'll ask the musicians, like, okay, do you know these and these and these and these tunes, 50 or 60 different songs. And basically, they'll go, yes, okay, and they talk through it for half an hour, and then they sit down and do a 9-hour show without rehearsal. And that's how it works, because the dalang will have memorized all the major character traits, and he knows all the relationships between the characters. And the musicians, of course, are also professionals, so they, once they hear a cue from the dalang, will instantly know which song to play and how it relates to the story. Yeah, so that's pretty amazing. In terms of just like how these arts are connected, and how a conductor of a gamelan ensemble would also have to know the story material, will have to know the different puppet cues and kind of like the sign language of the dalang, because he's not going to turn around and tell you which tune to play. He will rap some kind of rhythm on the box that indicates a certain shift in rhythm. He will have a certain puppet do a certain move on the screen, and that means now we need this song. And so those kind of things are really intricately related. Okay, so we're leaving the Mahabharata and Ramayana behind, and I just want to show you a few examples of how Wayang Kulit in the 21st century has adapted to new epic material. Okay, so in Malaysia, what's really hot right now is the Star Wars Wayang Kulit. And so this one dalang actually went all out, and I think he did like 60 or 70 different characters in Wayang style, but of course based on, I think it's the first core trilogy, the basic first core trilogy of the Star Wars epic, and has created, I think runs about 5-hour show based on this. Yeah. And so of course it's really kind of a genius trick to get younger audiences to come to Wayang, because especially in Malaysia, the audiences have kind of dwindled a little bit, and it's hard to kind of keep the attention of the younger generation. So that one definitely is working in Malaysia, and with the internet and everything that's helping spread the word, this is now famous beyond Malaysia, right? And so there's already copycat versions of this in other places in the Malay world. And then I want to talk a little bit about a new genre that is now commonly referred to as wayang listrik. And wayang listrik basically is a fancy translation of electric wayang. Okay, so listrik, Indonesian word for electricity. And the reason it's called listrik is because we're no longer using oil lamps, but we're using modern lighting. And actually that has happened for a while already, even like as early as the 1970s, that a lot of dalang have replaced single oil lamps flickering live flames with light bulbs, because it's maybe stronger, or it's just like more convenient than having somebody constantly fill oil and clip the wick and make sure the flame is at the right height and heat, etc. So that's already been going on for a long time, but those performances would still not be considered wayang listrik, although of course they do use like an electric light bulb. Wayang listrik has now basically become the term for any kind of contemporary modern wayang performances where you use multiple light sources, typically 2 or 3. Sometimes people even throw in computer projections or strobe lights, or what have it. Anything modern, anything that can create a new effect on the screen has been and is being experimented with. And so wayang listrik, the genre, is about the first time such a performance was actually done professionally in Bali. It's 1995, so it's really not very old. Yeah, and it's become kind of the new genre name for performances, mainly in Bali. And some of the pioneers of this style, I want to talk about a little bit. So one of them is originally a filmmaker from San Francisco named Larry Reed. He went to Bali to study as a dalang, and he studied for many years. And then he collaborated with Balinese dalang musicians, dancers, to kind of create these styles of modern day wayang. And what they've also found is that we no longer only have one puppeteer. We now have multiple puppeteers, sometimes up to 12. And so to accommodate that many actions, you also need a much larger screen. So the screen has grown from maybe something you can reach with your arms, the edge of like you reach, to about 30 meters across and 15 meters high. It's kind of like the new standard size of these wayang listrik screens now. And sometimes if you need to get from one side of the screen to the other, people actually sit on skateboards and zoom across and like puppet overhead. Yeah, so there's a lot of like innovations and new attempts to like how can we fill this big screen with new puppet actions. Another artist that has really experimented with the style is Imade Sidia. He's one of the artists that we actually worked with at UH, and he kind of created the script concept for us for our production that we did we just closed it last week at the University of Hawaii. And we did a wayang listrik based on the Subali Sugriva story, the Monkey Kings from the Ramayana. And Mr. Sidia was one of the people that, like 3 years ago, I collaborated with to kind of create this script that has then, been worked on and refined and adapted until like this last month. And what Sidia is kind of famous for is that he really also integrates shadow actors and dancers into the screen. So no longer do we only have puppets, but now we also have dancers becoming shadow puppets behind the screen. And so between Larry Reed and Made Sidia, what they have come up with is what we now call shadow masks. And I actually brought a few for you to see in a minute, but I want to just show you a little bit of a video clip that illustrates the type of work that is coming out of this new innovation of not only having puppeteers, not only having just puppets and one puppeteer, but having multiple puppeteers and having also shadow actors becoming kind of puppets.
Sawetan tinuduk dan yang para mukawi. Apa dari was jangkep ingitan penjaga padir. Wang ikan sangka wiswaru. Wang ikat punang tatua carita. Muat temakan usana Bali ngaranik. Ori tuan niran. O kanan nirang para pumaya dan awa. Uat pertemuan nirang Srijaya Pangus kelawan Dewi Danu. O antian beda karena nasa. Nimitan yang pejah puasa dan siang itu. Sama kana.
Sueca
Oramuan nirang siru simuai dan awal. Olira. Kasatan dari sajaran yang wadah. Wantian berdoa. Wipara yang banyak kenyukualuan wanita.
So what we did at the University of Hawaii, just this last month, we had a show on wayang listrik, and we brought in master artists from Bali, 3 of them, as a music director, as a puppet master, and as a designer. And we put together this wayang listrik production called Subali Sugriva Battle of the Monkey Kings. And we did use everything you just saw. We used traditional puppets, we used modern puppets, we used the full life gamelan, Balinese gamelan, and we also used shadow masks. And so this is a nice example of how we can combine shadow work as well as live dance in front of the screen. So we used like the 3D area in front of the screen, as well as dancers and puppets behind the screen. So in this shot, you have a live actor with a shadow mask, traditional puppets, and then live dancers. And also one of the monkey characters I showed you is actually in this scene here. So the little monkey puppet I showed you. I want to demonstrate a little bit how these shadow masks work for you. So I brought 2. So the ingenious thing is you have 2 faces, right? So one side, I mean, typically it's the same face, it's the same kind of puppet, right? So that allows the actors to basically act in both directions. The real trick, though, with these masks is that you be really becoming a shadow puppet. And you can never really look at your partner because you have to look at the screen, otherwise you lose your face. So if I, as an actor, look at myself or look at my partner, what happens is you're losing the face, right? And it takes about 3 months of training for the actors to really learn how to become your shadow, right? So to become your shadow is basically, it's like an out-of-body experience because you're no longer acting in your body, right? You have to always keep your eyes on the screen and see if it looks right. If your character is nodding, you no longer do this, you do this. Because your face is this way, right? If you have a battle scene, you can't look at your partner and stab them because then you lose your face, so you're constantly doing this, right? And so you're looking at the shadow. Are we connecting? Are we hitting? You know, who am I stabbing? And so it's a real challenge to kind of become a shadow puppet as a shadow actor. And so that's a long process, and it's constantly being experimented with, and there's now scenery that you have to deal with and stand in and be in the right proportion to where your character size fits with whatever tree or shrub or temple or throne you're standing next to. So as you get closer to the screen, your figure gets smaller, and as you get closer to the light, your figure gets bigger. So that, of course, allows you all kinds of great effects in terms of making a gigantic person and a really tiny one, and then they can battle, or they can, you know, do all kinds of other scenes. So that's kind of like the new hip trend in Wayang Kulit performances, to really take it into live actors becoming shadow puppets. And who knows what's next? I mean, computer projections are becoming all the rage now. Personally, I really like the fact that our scenery was all low-tech, and it was all hand-painted and hand-operated, and all the special effects were done in real time by the cast. So if you have it all computer projected, it kind of takes a little bit of the magic away. But definitely there's all kinds of new inventions that are integrated with mirrors, with water, with all kinds of other special effects. So it's a really interesting tradition to watch right now, and I'm so pleased that I was able to work with these artists and kind of put the show together here. So this is the talk for now.